The Mercedes-Benz S-Class has long represented the pinnacle of what a luxury sedan can be. So clearly, the Mercedes EQS is meant to do the same for electric luxury sedans. But does it? Because this is the Lucid Air, and this thing, when it came along, blew away the luxury competition. Nobody saw it coming. It had more range, more power, more performance, and it just looked gorgeous. This one that I'm testing is the Lucid Air Pure. It's actually the base model, the cheapest one that you can get, which is why I've got it here together with the Mercedes EQS 450 Plus sedan, which is also the base level EQS. And in this video, we're gonna see which one is best. So we're gonna take a look at the EQS here on the outside. This clearly is a different model from the S-Class. There's a reason why this wasn't just called the electric S-Class. They had many goals for this car, including making it the most aerodynamically efficient production car in the world. And when it debuted, it actually was with a 0.2 drag coefficient. You have this super slippery body. We have this very smooth grille with these Mercedes logos here. We have a light bar here at the front, very low hood, leaning into this very jelly bean-like shape. We do have larger wheels here on this particular EQS than what you're gonna get as standard on this car. These are the optional 21-inch wheels from AMG. I do think they look really nice as well. But as you can see, everything is very aerodynamic. Even the door handles actually tuck into the body. You just swipe them like so, and they emerge. But that is all to keep this as aerodynamically efficient as possible. And what I find super funny about that is that Mercedes told us that this is how you have to design a car to get the maximum amount of range. This is the shape that is going to be the best through the air and get you that best range. And it has to look like a jelly bean. But then Lucid came along and said, nope, no, it doesn't. And now we check out the Lucid Air, because what I find so funny is that Mercedes was so pathologically obsessed with aerodynamics that it created this weird jelly bean shape, all to achieve a 0.2 drag coefficient. Well, the Lucid Air is gorgeous, and it actually has a lower drag coefficient of just 0.197 without being a weird jelly bean. So bravo Lucid on that. I definitely think this is the more attractive car. It has a more conventional front end. The silver kind of eyebrow here might not be your favorite. You can black that out on certain models, but I think the Air looks really nice even on this base trim. We do have some optional wheels here. You get 19-inch aero wheels on the Pure as standard. These 20-inch wheels are an upgrade that do hurt the range just a little bit, so I probably wouldn't get those. But as you can see, the size of the Lucid Air is really interesting. It's more of the size of something like a Mercedes E-Class or a Mercedes EQE. Really long wheelbase with not a lot of overhang there. Really cool looking shape. It almost looks like it could be French. It's just so darn cool looking. And the thing is, even though this is more the size of an E-Class or an EQE or an i5, it really feels like it belongs with things like the S-Class on the inside, as we'll soon find out. So now let's check out the interior of the Mercedes EQS. And while I tried to have like as base model to base model as I could, and this is an EQS 450 Plus, this one does have a number of options that are going to make it a lot more expensive than the absolute base that Mercedes offers. We've got these really beautiful real leather seats. You get faux leather, as I will say incorrectly when I am viewing the Lucid, as I had to film this. On the base Lucid, you're gonna get fake leather. Every other one is gonna have real leather, but it does feel really nice. But this leather is super nice as well. We've got the diamond quilting here. We even have some Mercedes branded pillows on the headrest that is optional. These are heated, ventilated, and massaging. Again, optionally extra, but really nice. I'm loving this brown here as well. The EQS has this gigantic screen. In terms of technology, the EQS is just so impressive. I'm gonna hit the start button right here. It does actually have a start button, unlike the Lucid Air, where you just get in it, put your foot on the brake and go like you would in a Tesla. The hyper screen is the big thing here. So we've got the main infotainment system here where everything is handled here. Wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, all of that good stuff. We're gonna have our digital gauge cluster here. You can actually configure how this looks. I do prefer how these gauges are laid out than how they are in the Lucid, because you can just customize more about it. You can have more information in here. You can kind of change up how it looks. You can have your radio station. You can have a little map. You can have all sorts of things. We have a very big, very nice augmented reality head-up display as well. We've got a 15 speaker Burmester audio system connected to this. Not the best that Mercedes offers, but it definitely sounds better than the base system that's in the Lucid. Lucid does have an upgraded audio system that sounds really good as well. We also have this passenger screen over here. They've added some functionality to it to make it like a little bit more useful. You can watch YouTube on it, but only while parked, because you can see it from over here on the driver's side. So they unfortunately don't let you do any of that while you're moving. If we go here in the App Store, you can find YouTube, you can find a web browser, you can find Apple Music. They've definitely added a lot of stuff to this. You can even play Tetris on it, which is really cool, Sudoku. So really cool, but unless you have a passenger with you, that screen is pretty much going to stay off most of the time. Now, in terms of rear legroom, the EQS is the biggest electric car that Mercedes currently sells in terms of length, at least on the sedan side. Again, we've got some pillows that actually say EQS back here, more pillows on the headrests as well. The one thing is, though, we do have a lot of legroom back here. We actually have over 40 inches, but it doesn't really feel that way to me. It feels a little bigger in the Lucid, if I'm being honest, and this doesn't feel quite as big and spacious as it does in the Mercedes S-Class. I don't have a ton of headroom here. My head is almost touching, and I'm really not all that tall. You can actually lean the seat back just a little bit, because we have an optional extra here on this EQS, so we do have like power rear seats here. But even when I recline it back, you can see my head is kind of close to touching the roof here. This back seat as a whole just doesn't feel quite as nice as the Mercedes S-Class, and honestly, I think even compared to the Lucid, the numbers may be betraying the EQS here a little bit, because I think the Lucid feels more spacious. Mercedes might call this a sedan, but the EQS is actually a hatchback, which is kind of interesting. You get 22 cubic feet of space back here, which is technically a tenth less than what you're gonna get in the Lucid. But as you can see, I think this is a more useful space. You have this huge long opening. You can fit taller, longer, wider objects in here, I think, more easily. If you have potted plants or whatever at Home Depot, I think it is going to fit in the trunk of the EQS a little bit better than it is in the Lucid, despite the numbers implying that the Lucid actually has more space. We do have some underfloor storage as well. You can fit your charging cable back there. Folding down the seats is super easy because it is quite a reach to grab those manually. You do have some releases here. Just pull these tabs, and the seats are gonna go ahead and fold. You get about 63 cubic feet total, which again, the Lucid technically has more, but this is just so big. You could fit a mountain bike in here, no problem. I think that this is definitely the more usable car, despite the Lucid actually having more space. I am surprised though, these buttons actually move both ways. I thought that if you would have pushed them the other way, that these seats would lift back up automatically. This is a car with a 6-figure price tag, so I'm actually kind of surprised that it doesn't have seats that go auto up as well as auto down. And I should point out that the EQS does not have anything under this hood. In fact, this doesn't open aside from servicing. You can't even open it up to put windshield wiper fluid. That's why they have this little thing right here that slides out of the side here. You put your windshield wiper fluid in there because basically you're never gonna open that hood. Now let's get back to the Lucid in terms of the interior. And again, this is the base model. The only thing that we actually have as an option on this car is an Alcantara headliner for $800. Everything else is actually standard here on the Air Pure, including these leather seats. You get a little bit of perforation as well. These are heated seats. For $2,000 extra, you can make them ventilated and massaged, but heating is standard. They have some nice bolstering as well. The materials on this base model seriously feel like I'm sitting in a $100,000 car. We've got this nice fabric here on the door. We've got soft touch. We've got wood everywhere. There is not a cheap surface anywhere to be found on this car. The technology is really cool looking. We've got a 34-inch glass cockpit, which not as much screen real estate as what you're going to get in the Mercedes, but it does look very nice floating there on the dashboard like this. You've got your main infotainment here with wireless Apple CarPlay. You've got your gauges here showing your speed, and then you have some alternate controls over here for things like the windshield wipers and the trunks. We also have this pilot panel that you can use to control the drive modes. This is where you adjust the steering wheel and the mirrors. It's a little bit weird getting used to that, like not having a regular control here on the steering wheel to adjust it. But once you get everything set up, I believe it should be just fine. You can control your seats here as well. I like that you can have certain menu items here, certain items up here. So you could have your map up here, audio down here, vice versa. So you can kind of break it up. This also slides up to reveal some really cool storage. Speaking of which, we've got tons of storage in here with this nice fabric cover, cup holders, tons of storage, cable organizer, more storage here in the glove box. I really just love how the Lucid Air lays out its cabin. Now, as I've mentioned at certain points in this video, we've kind of stacked the box against the Lucid, putting it up against such a nice, expensive car, but it really still does well. We've got over 37 inches of legroom here. This is ginormous for a car that's really competing in the midsize class against things like the Mercedes EQE, not the EQS, things like the BMW 5 Series, and I just have so much space back here. I've got all my air vents, I've got a little screen, a little cubby drawer with some chargers as well. It is fantastically roomy back in here for a midsize, but it just doesn't quite compete with something like the EQS. Now, while the Mercedes has a hatchback giving you a huge amount of space, the Lucid Air has a normal conventional trunk, and it opens up in kind of a weird way. There's definitely not as big of an opening as the Mercedes, but the storage space is closer than you might expect. Believe it or not, the Air actually has like 1/10 of a cubic feet of space more than the EQS does. It is super deep. We also have this little handle we can lift up to reveal so much more storage in there. I believe that's how Lucid is getting that better storage space number here in the trunk, despite the EQS having the much larger opening. And believe it or not, you can actually fold these seats down. And again, while the opening itself will not be as wide as it is in the EQS, you still get a ton of space here, and it is actually very comparable to what you get in the Mercedes. But it doesn't stop there, because the Air does not just have a trunk. Unlike the Mercedes, which has nothing underneath the front, the Lucid has one of the biggest frunks that money can buy. Look at that. It's gigantic. I could fit in there and have a drink and relax. It's absolutely massive. You can actually get a power frunk as well. The Pure just has kind of a manual opening, but that is a lot of space that is just completely wasted on the Mercedes. All right, now we're gonna start the driving segment here in the Mercedes-Benz EQS Sedan, because Mercedes is supposed to be the standard of the world when it comes to luxury. They've been making cars for over 100 years. So how is a startup that is basically pooping their diapers in terms of their age compared to Mercedes, how are they possibly going to match the engineering excellence of a company steeped in that much history? So we're starting in the EQS 450 Plus. Again, we're comparing base models here. And the 450 Plus version of the EQS has a single motor on the rear axle. It's rear-wheel drive, produces 355 horsepower and a very healthy 419 pound-foot of torque. And I think for the majority of drivers, you're going to be fine with this level of power. Even compared to like base V6 Mercedes S-classes, this thing feels very spry once you're moving. You put your foot down, whoo, it gives you that nice instant kick. It's super quiet. You have no noise. That's what you'd expect from a flagship Mercedes model. Really, I don't think too many people are going to be disappointed by the performance here. That being said, the 0 to 60 time isn't like super inspiring. Mercedes says it takes 5.8 seconds to hit 60 miles an hour, but we have our own testing equipment. So I'm going to come to a stop here, put it in sport mode, floor it, and all right, not too bad of a shove. And that's 60, so let's slow down. So our testing equipment says the quickest run we got was about 5.62 seconds. So a little quicker than Mercedes said. So really not all that bad there. Not gonna pin you back in your seat. As you saw, my head didn't go like this into my nice cushioned pillowy headrest here. For that, you'd have to get one of the more powerful EQS models. You can actually get the EQS 450 4MATIC. So unlike Lucid, you can actually get the base powertrain of the EQS in a dual motor, and the power is going to stay the same. Oddly, you're only going to get 355 horsepower, but you do get a much more substantial 590 pound-feet of torque, dropping the 0 to 60 by about a half second to about 5.3. So if the measurements stay the same, you're probably looking at almost about 5 seconds flat. The range does take a hit though, and the range on this car is honestly pretty good because it has a very large 108.4 kilowatt hour battery. You get 352 miles in this car if you get rear wheel drive like the one we have. If you opt for the 4MATIC all-wheel drive, that's going to drop not really all that much to 345 miles. So only a 7-mile hit to get all-wheel drive and a lot more torque. That's probably worth it in my book. And then of course you have much quicker models. You have the 580 4MATIC, which is again a dual motor, 536 horsepower in that one, 633 pound-feet of torque. So huge bumps on the power there, 4.1 seconds to 60 miles an hour. You're really going to feel that level of acceleration. And the amazing thing there is that the 580 4MATIC actually has the same range as the 450 4MATIC, 345 miles, which is super impressive. So if you can afford it and you're already going to get the dual motor, you're probably going to be more impressed with the 580. And Mercedes does make a crazy AMG version. I actually have a review of it here on this channel. It is really fast. It is 649 horsepower, 700 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers go up to 751 horsepower and 752 pound-feet when you use the overboost launch control function, which gets you from 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. The range is pretty heavily affected though. You only go 300 miles in that model. And I want to talk a little bit about how the EQS drives, because this is supposed to be the electric S-Class, and it sort of does that. It's very comfortable. I'm not going to go ahead and say this drives better than an S-Class though. It definitely feels a little roly-poly. The steering is okay, you know, it's definitely got that light Mercedes feeling. It's a little more direct than, you know, some other electric cars out there. The rear motor version is definitely a little bit lighter, but this does feel like a very big, heavy car. We do have rear wheel steering, which helps a lot when you're doing sort of parking lot maneuvers. I don't love it as much when you're trying to drive spiritly. I think that it can kind of lead the vehicle to feel a little bit wonky. Mercedes is a little weird with how they calibrate their rear wheel steering systems, but it definitely helps when you're doing parking lot maneuvers because this is a very big, very long car. In terms of comfort, it rides really well, even though we've got some big wheels on this particular model. The suspension is very soft. We do get some really weird secondary rebound. These are things that you don't get in an S-Class. The one thing, and it's kind of been my theme of the EQS since like the first time I drove this, I didn't really notice it as much, but then I had more time with it and I drove it back to back with S-Class, and I just noticed that for whatever reason, this doesn't feel the same as an S-Class. It is not an electric S-Class. That's why it has a completely different name. So if you're looking for the best luxury experience that Mercedes offers and you're kind of agnostic as to what the powertrain is, I still think that the S-Class is going to be that vehicle for you. I do think that this EQS is very quiet. It is very serene and comfortable. As we talked about, it's very aerodynamic, and I think you could probably squeeze 400 miles out of this. Even though Mercedes only quotes 352, it gives you a little min-max. So it's like if you drive really badly with the air conditioning on, all of that stuff, or if you kind of, you know, go easy and don't do super high speeds, whatever, it gives you a maximum. And I think with a full charge, like if you're not doing a lot of highway driving, I think you could probably eke 400 miles out of this car. But When we hop into the Lucid and we see the specs that it's able to provide, considering how new Lucid is as a company, I think you're going to be pretty shocked. So now that we've checked out the Mercedes, let's drive the Lucid. And remember, we are comparing base model to base model here. And in terms of the overall specs, this Lucid wins. Just straight up, let me just come right out of the gate and say that this also has a single electric motor. But in this case, we've got 430 horsepower doing 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. So not only is this blowing away the Mercedes EQS in terms of power and range, this is blowing away any single motor electric vehicle that you can buy today. This is blowing away BMW. This is blowing away Genesis. Honestly, this is right up there with Tesla. In fact, this is better than Tesla in terms of range and performance, and this is just the base model. We've got a much smaller than the Mercedes 82 kilowatt hour battery, but despite the battery being smaller, the range is higher. We get 419 miles here on the Lucid. If you opt for the smaller 19-inch aero wheels, on these 20-inch aero wheels, you still get 394 miles, which is more than the EQS. It's more than any electric car that Mercedes makes. And the crazy thing is the performance only goes up from there. You get the Touring model that has 620 horsepower and still over 400 miles of range. You have the Grand Touring, which is over 800 horsepower. So now we're in territory above even that AMG EQS. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat, quicker than the AMG EQS, and a 516 mile range. Nowhere can Mercedes, Tesla, anybody even come close to the range that this Lucid can do in that Grand Touring model, and we still aren't done yet. I know it is more expensive than the AMG EQS, but Lucid does have the Sapphire Air, which is so bonkers. It's 1,234 horsepower, does 0 to 60 in 1.89 seconds, and it still does 427 miles with a 205 mile an hour top speed. Nothing from AMG, nothing from M is even close to that. In fact, the Sapphire is quicker than a Tesla Model S Plaid. So this Lucid Air, I really kind of felt bad. I felt like I was throwing Mercedes to the wolves, but Mercedes is a car company that has over 100 years of engineering history, of engineering excellence. And this upstart from California has just come along and stolen their lunch 100%. And I don't want to single Mercedes out in this review, even though we are comparing the Air to the EQS. This is better than BMW. This is better than Genesis. This is better than Tesla even. This is the best electric sedan that money can buy. In fact, I know it's tough because people really want crossovers, but I just think that this is the most well-engineered electric car that money can buy, and it's not even particularly close. It drives so well. I'm not going to go ahead and say it's as comfortable as that EQS, like just raw comfort, but it is way more comfortable than a comparable Mercedes EQE, which is really the thing that's closer in terms of pricing. But it drives so much better. This thing drives so small. The steering is excellent. The throttle inputs are excellent. I love that this is the rear motor model that you can just kind of control the back end with 430 horsepower. The steering is just so good. The body control is great. It's so darn quiet. It feels like it belongs in that EQS, in that i7 territory, but it's priced the same as an i5, priced the same as an EQE, but the mileage, the power is just so much better. This Lucid is really beyond compare. It's just that good. So let's price out our 2024 Mercedes EQS 450. Pricing for this model starts at just over $104,000. If you were to lease it instead of buying it, you're gonna be putting about $7,600 down for 36 months, and you're gonna be spending over $1,000 a month on the lease payment compared to the Lucid, which is going to be significantly less, as we are about to find out. You're going to be spending about $47,000 through those 3 years. And remember, this EQS that we've been driving is not completely base. The price on this one with all of the optional extras is about $128,000, meaning it's about double the price of the Lucid Air. And I don't want this to just be a referendum on Mercedes. That is not fair to Mercedes as a brand. This is a very, very nice car. But I think what the Lucid does is it shows that established luxury automakers are gonna have a problem quite soon. They're already getting crushed by Tesla in sales. But if these upstart companies are able to come along and out-innovate companies that have been doing it for over 100 years, then is the three-pointed star really going to save Mercedes or BMW or Genesis or any of these other companies that are finally starting to do electric cars? Are their brand heritage, like, is the brand name alone going to get people into the showrooms? I'm just not that sure. And the EQS only gets more expensive from there. 4MATIC is going to be $107,000. Again, for $3,000, I think it's worth it to get the all-wheel drive on this car. $127,000 to start is what that 580 is going to cost. So pretty close to what our well-optioned 450 Plus is going to cost, but you do get a lot more power. That's going to be about $1,200 a month with $11,000 down. That is just so expensive. And don't even get me started on the AMG model, which is $147,000. You could just as easily go for the Lucid Air Grand Touring, which is much quicker, as we'll talk about. And the more fair comparison, the Mercedes EQE starts at $76,000, goes up to about $107,000. So honestly, just because I picked the EQS for this particular review, it wouldn't really have mattered if I picked an EQE. I think we basically would have come to the same conclusion, that the Lucid is amazing value, as we're about to find out. Now, the Mercedes is very expensive, so when I tell you how much this Lucid Air costs, you just have to close your jaw. This Lucid Air Pure starts at under $70,000. It is less expensive than the Mercedes EQE, but I think it punches closer to the EQS in terms of performance and comfort. That's how good this Lucid Air Pure is. And if you're interested in leasing it, a base model EQS, that's gonna cost you over $1,000. For the same price, you can actually step up to the Lucid Air GT with over 800 horsepower, over 500 miles of range for about the same price. This Pure model leases for just $650 a month. It is a fraction of what even the Mercedes EQE costs. It's really kind of just an unfair comparison with the EQS. But it wouldn't have mattered if I had an EQE, it wouldn't have mattered if I had a BMW i5, it wouldn't have mattered if I had a Genesis G80 electrified next to this Lucid Air. They all would have been embarrassed. That's how good this Lucid Air is, and honestly, right now, I think it is completely unrivaled.